Welcome back to Supporting Physician Spouses. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kendra. Whether it's your first time tuning in or you've been following since the beginning, we're so glad you're here.
Yes, we're launching a new mini-series focused on physical self-care, the basics that often get overlooked when life is crazy.
And today we're focusing on two, hydration and hygiene, which may sound simple, but they have a huge impact on our mood, energy, mental clarity, and overall well-being.
We've all been there, caught in the cycle of overfunctioning, survival mode, burnout, and resentment. It's exhausting, but these foundational habits are a great place to start reclaiming your health and yourself.
It's really about reinserting yourself into your family and your life, not letting your needs fall to the wayside because you're too busy caring for everyone else.
So today we're digging into those two important basics and sharing some research-backed insights, plus our own real-life experiences.
Ready to dive in?
Yes, let's go.
Last time we shared the email Katie sent me that started a coaching relationship and ultimately this podcast. It came from a place of concern about being burned out and disconnected. And what's one of the first things we uncovered?
Oh man, that one, I could identify my core needs, but that I wasn't consistently meeting those needs. I had the habit, and I still do, to be honest, of slipping in and out of taking care of these needs. Sometimes it's out of feeling like I'm well enough without making them priority. And other times it's because I hit survival mode and then things just fall to the wayside. Ultimately, I find myself in cycles of I'm doing fine, so I slip my habits, and then I find myself in survival, burnout, and ultimately resentment, and then I get back on board, and then I'm better, and then you know the cycle.
I do know the cycle because you're human, so welcome to the club. And that's a common cycle for people in our predicament, in our life situation. So today we're talking about that feeling, what it means and what you can do when it shows up. So we're going to go back to the basics, these foundational practices that support your ability to function, to show up, and to feel like you again.
Yeah, because sometimes we forget that we aren't just passengers on this journey. We're becoming something too through it. I'm also excited to spend time to talk about these, talk about their importance because they're like the primary answers. The things that all are really important for us, but let's get back on board and really take them seriously in our own lives.
Good. Let's do that. You just nailed it, kind of like why these basic needs often get overlooked, and especially in physician families where we have people who are partnered with highly competent people. You yourself are highly competent. I think I'm highly competent. We're juggling kids and careers, partners with unpredictable schedules. We're all solving problems to keep life moving, and yet so many of us are also exhausted with short fuses, running on fumes. That cycle you talk about of just constantly going through around and around and around. It would be nice to get off that occasionally.
Yeah, it just makes me think of the last time I found myself in this over-functioning survival mode. My husband was doing an away rotation at a children's hospital a couple hours away. So he was gone for weeks at a time. Even before he left, I started to push him away because I was starting to feel feelings of abandonment coming in, right? Starting day one, I asked myself while I was doing the dishes, have I even had a drink of water today? I was trying to get through the day quickly, kind of rushing my kids through every step. So not necessarily angry, but kind of pushy and like, come on, stick with the program. Um, and I even printed out like 6 weeks of spring cleaning to do while he was gone. And I was like, oh, am I over functioning? Yes, I am.
Yes. I love that. And I remember that call really well because we all have these patterns that we go through, and that's that kind of cycle of being able to recognize what's happening, but not really being able to change behavior. Yet that's all part of the learning process. Like you have to be able to identify in order to make changes, and then you have to have lots of opportunities to practice to really get that new pathway and new habit in place. And so many of us do that. In order to not feel rejected, we reject first. In order to not feel abandoned, we abandon. And yet we complain about not feeling connected to our spouses or feeling like we're in this together. And yet we're responsible for some of that by some of the actions and behaviors and things that we're doing that don't make it better. So, one of the other things we do is we absolutely normalize this cycle or this continually running on empty and always giving, always being depleted. This is maybe a little bit simplistic, but what's really happening is you've let go of the behaviors that anchor you to you. And this overfunctioning takes over, and you're just going through all of the motions, this survival mode. And I know you're a mother, I'm a mother, and what's crazy is we bend over backwards to make sure that our kids are eating breakfast and having lunch and having a dinner before 9 o'clock at night, that they're getting enough sleep. We're making sure they go down for naps, that they have water in their water bottle before they go off to school, that they brush their teeth, that they're moving their bodies and not sitting in front of the TV, that they're making friends. We can drive ourselves crazy trying to make sure that our children have what they need. And then we act like our needs don't exist. Like they're just optional and they would be nice to have if there's time, instead of treating them like the important thing that they are.
Most important, yeah. And I know when we've talked, when I'm in the survival mode, I have a hard time even problem solving how to create space for myself. I get in the habit of going to the park because I don't want to deal with the backlash of my kids, not wanting to go on a walk, which is what I need. So I'm finding myself letting my children and their behavior lead the family, at least lead me while my spouse is busy, all adding to my lack a little bit.
Yeah. We had so many good calls, Katie. I'm remembering the one where we talked about that concept of a family centered family versus a parent centered family or a kid centered family. And I think there was a moment where you kind of had this, like, you weren't quite sure what to make of it. Like, is that even a reality? Is that a possibility where in,
Mhm.
a family centered family is where the needs of every family member are taken into account? It isn't just what is best for the parent or what is best for the child, but we look at it as a whole family system. Do you remember that moment where you were kind of like, I don't know about this?
Eyes wide open, mind exploding, because it's really easy for me to identify how we were really functioning as a child-centered family. I think part of that is because I find myself solo parenting so often that it just easier. But the more I've pushed and allowed my kids to do things that fulfill my needs, like the walks, like the bike rides, suddenly all the family feels better, right? Typically, I don't do things that they can't do, right? I'm not like, we're going to go on a 10-mile hike because this is what I
Yeah.
want to do. But um, we go on the bike ride because I want to. I got two kids in the trailer and one that can ride a bike, and everyone feels great, and we're connecting way better. Um, so it reinserting myself into my family unit, including and filling my needs, is huge, and it's been wonderful. Challenging, yes,
Awesome.
but really important.
Challenging can be wonderful. They
Hmm.
usually go hand in hand. So
Yeah.
today, let's walk through these 5 foundational basics of self care. And these are pulled from a worksheet that I have in my toolbox. So we will hit that, but we're going to focus on the 5 that have to do with your physical self. And these are simple, but they are also essential, especially if you want to feel like yourself again. And so this is often where we will start. And just
Hmm.
also a little caveat, both Katie and I, we appreciate things that are academic and research based and just aren't, because somebody said so. And so
Hmm.
each of these ones, they are backed by solid research in psychology, neuroscience, and public health. I wouldn't say one is necessarily more important, although you will hear me say that one is more important than the other when we get to it. But why don't we go through each of those in detail and start there? What do you think?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start with hydration. So this is one of the fastest ways that you can influence your mood, your energy, and your mental clarity.
This is really interesting. Like I said, that my most recent day of hitting survival mode, this was the first habit I realized that I had slipped. But also, a couple months ago, I started a habit app. It was called the Fabulous app. And this is the first foundational habit that they ask every participant in their app to do, is to start their day by drinking a glass of water. Um, and it's not about sports performance. It's not about making sure our muscles aren't cramping, but it's about this mental clarity and just getting all of the body systems kind of alive and firing first thing in the morning.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned athletic performance because typically you're like, oh, when I'm working out, I need to drink water. And then if you're not working out, do you really need to drink water? And it's like, yes, you still need to be drinking a lot of water. This is from a publication in the Journal of Nutrition. And it says that even mild dehydration, just 1% to 2% of body water loss, can impair cognitive function, memory, and mood regulation. And they found that women who were slightly dehydrated experienced significantly higher levels of fatigue, confusion, and tension. And I don't know about you, but I can't afford any more higher levels of fatigue, confusion, or tension. So let's go through some of those points in a little more detail. Do you want to take the first one?
Yeah. So let's talk about cognitive function and emotional well-being. So even mild dehydration can impair cognitive functions such as concentration, alertness, and short-term memory. Women who often juggle multiple roles, multiple mental loads, may find that inadequate hydration exasperates feelings of fatigue and stress. Staying well hydrated supports mental clarity and emotional stability, enabling better decision making and mood regulation.
That's enough to make me want to take a sip of water
I
right now.
know.
So
Suddenly I'm
you
feeling
can't see
very
it.
thirsty.
Yes, all of a sudden we're salivating. The other thing it does, it increases your physical health and your energy level. So water plays a critical role in regulating your body temperature, in lubricating your joints, and in transporting nutrients throughout your body. So especially for mothers, those particularly who are pregnant or breastfeeding, the body's demand for fluids increase. You probably remember that from your time being pregnant, all of that fluid in your body. But adequate hydration helps you maintain energy levels, reduce the risk of urinary tract infections, and supports overall physical health.
Our last point we want to talk about is digestive health. So, hydration aids in digestion by helping to break down food and absorb nutrients efficiently. Additionally, drinking water before meals can promote a sense of fullness, potentially aiding to weight management as well.
So again, just in case any of our listeners weren't sure if they should be drinking more water, the answer is probably you should be drinking more water.
This is a really good reminder that hydration is important for just our basic baseline physical and cognitive functioning.
Exactly. If they say that your brain is 75% water, then hydration isn't optional, it's actually fuel. Okay, next let's talk about hygiene. And every time I say hygiene, I think of my husband because, when it's time for the kids to like shower or brush their teeth or wash their hands or something, he always goes, "Hi, Jean." Hi,
That's
Jean.
cute.
This isn't just about cleanliness, though, which, that's also important. But there's so much about that that is connected to our sense of self worth and nervous system regulation.
Yeah, I love to lean into the nervous system regulation here. Hygiene or self care, getting your skin routine going is quite trendy right now. And I have an instinct to be very anti trend. I'm like, you think I need a skin routine? Like, I'm good with Cetaphil. Like, lay off me. Um, I've experienced nothing is more calming or resetting than a warm shower at night or even a mildly cold one in the morning to just kind of wake up my body. Um, or even the massaging to the face. There is something that's just so soothing, kind of engages that parasympathetic nervous system to just kind of calm and relax us.
I had a friend when we were in residency, and she had 7 kids at the time. And she was telling me the thing that she does is every morning she gets up and she gets dressed, even with her shoes on. Like somehow that action, it's like the thought behind it. But what I took from it is that, I matter. Like me being up and dressed and ready for the day tells my body something. It
Mm.
tells my psyche something. It tells me that I'm ready, that we're going to do today. I'm not going to be in my pajamas and I'm not going to stay in bed all day, which sometimes I do choose to stay in my pajamas. And that certainly does send a message to my brain about what's happening today. Today,
Mhm.
for example, it's kind of cold and rainy. It would be really easy to just not be here, to put my pajamas on, but I've got work to do. We've got this podcast to do. So we get up, we get dressed, and we get to work. There is research, though, that says that Consistent hygiene routines have been associated with lower rates of depression and anxiety symptoms. So it's not just about looking presentable and getting to work. It's really about restoring dignity when everything else around you might feel messy.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's really good. And hygiene also has this ability to improve our confidence and self esteem. And I find myself when I've had a week of not really brushing my hair before I get out of the house and just running off to school, I can start to feel that lack. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? It's like, well, take a moment, feel yourself, like, take care of this beautiful body that we have. Feeling clean and well groomed can also boost that self esteem, making individuals more likely to engage in social interactions and pursue personal goals. For mothers, this confidence can translate into more effective parenting and better relationships.
That's part of what helps me be effective is because it's like putting on a uniform in a sense. You get ready for the task that you're going to do. And motherhood and being a spouse is a really important role, and we should be prepared for it. As you were talking about that, it made me think that sometimes you just have a night where it's like, oh, I'm just so tired. All I can do is brush my teeth, but I'll look and I'll be like, you didn't wear that much makeup today. It's not a big deal. We'll talk about this in another episode, like habit stacking. And so I tell myself, like, all you have to do is brush your teeth and then you can go to bed. But inevitably, once I start brushing my teeth, then I know the next thing I do is I take off my makeup and I wash my face and I do the whole routine. And it just happens, but it's sometimes just getting started is the hard part. And so in a future episode, we'll talk about how to build these habits out and how to stack them so they're just part of what happens. We've got one more item in this section on hygiene that we want to talk about because we all know this, that mothers do serve as the primary role model for their children, especially if you're married to somebody who is gone a lot of the time and they are not seeing their other parent demonstrate some of those good hygiene practices. But it does teach our children the importance of cleanliness and self-care from an early age. And this is not only going to promote their immediate health, but it also instills these lifelong habits that contribute to their overall well-being. And I know your kids are young right now. Mine are a little bit older. And so I've kind of seen the gamut of, as they start to care a little bit more about hygiene, it's nice that there actually does become a point where you don't have to be worrying about what am I modeling or what do I have to remind them to do, because all of a sudden something switches in them. And now all of a sudden they take care of all of those things because they want to. And they
Mhm.
like the way that it feels. And they like the feedback that they get from others.
Yeah, my kids right now are in a Montessori school and they teach like self sufficiency from the youngest age. And part of that is creating just the environment. And so part of that modeling for me in our home has been asking myself, do they have access to all these things? Do they have the ability to do all these? Because there's like that tiny window when they're toddlers and they want to do it. That typically we say, no, like I'm faster at it, you're gonna make a mess of it, and so you don't. And then I think, well, I missed that boat. I have to wait till maybe they get this peer pressure later. So I'm like trying to be really sensitive in this period of maybe we can build this self-sufficiency early on.
Yeah, that would be great if you could shave a couple years off of that
Yeah,
process. That's less stinky
right.
people.
Or just for me, it's just more mental load, like
Yeah.
one more thing to remind them to do in the morning.
Well, friends, that wraps part one of our mini series on physical self care basics. Hydration and hygiene might seem small, but they're powerful ways to start breaking the burnout cycle and reconnecting with yourself.
We're saving sleep, movement, and nutrition for next week's episode, so make sure to tune in and keep building on these habits.
We so appreciate you listening, and remember, these basics aren't optional. They are foundational for your health, your family, and your ability to show up fully.
All right, until next time, take care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.